Hello and welcome to our channel What Does This Data Say? I am Ajay Prakash. It was a cool November night in New York. A young man stood before a sea of faces, the winter breeze carrying chants through the Queens. His name, Zohran Mamdani, son of two continents, now the mayor-elect of New York City. Before the cheers faded, he reached not for slogans but for history. He said, "Standing before you, I think of the words of Jawaharlal Nehru. A moment comes, but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends and the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. Tonight we have stepped out from the old into the new." A quote born in 1947 India, now echoed in 2025 America. And as the crowd roared, the DJ faded in a rhythm from Bollywood, Dhoom Machale. Queens erupted, an Indian freedom speech melting into Hindi pop on a New York night. It was more than a victory rally, it was cultural fusion, political poetry, and diaspora pride. But who is Zohran Mamdani? And how did a man once given just 1% chance of winning come to command the world's most diverse city? This is the Zohran Mamdani you do not know. When he first announced his run, the political class chuckled. They called it symbolic, a poetic experiment destined to fail. He had no corporate donors, no billionaire backups, no dynastic name. What he had instead was pavement underfoot and purpose in his voice. He walked through Queens, block by block, alley by alley, listening to tenants, street vendors, delivery riders, taxi drivers. His rallies were held under street lights, not chandeliers. A volunteer later said he did not campaign with money, he campaigned with presence. That presence, sincere, sweating, sometimes exhausted, began to spread. By listening instead of lecturing, he turned invisibility into influence. When Zohran Mamdani first stepped into the race, he wasn't greeted with fanfare. He was greeted with the puzzled looks and blank faces. Picture this: a narrow sidewalk in Astoria, Queens. Mamdani holding a bright blue and orange flyer, a handheld megaphone strapped on his shoulder, asking passers-by, "Excuse me, 1 minute of your time. How is your rent? How is your commute?" Few stopped. Some shook their heads. Many walked away. But he stayed another 2 minutes and then another, because the real campaigning wasn't about the applause, it was about the question. A busy intersection near the subway, he paused a driver changing a tire. With his megaphone off, he asked, "How's your shift going, sir? Are you getting enough rest?" The driver replied tiredly, "Barely." Mamdani did not walk on. He scribbled a note, shook the man's hand, gave him his card. He returned later with a volunteer in hoodie, offering a ride share driver coffee and a promise: "We'll fight for your rights." Meanwhile, the campuses of City University of New York, the campaign made waves. He visited a student union hall at CUNY, the generic name used for their university system. Students were skeptical. Mamdani arrived with no entourage, no banner, just a megaphone. He asked them, "What's the one thing you would change about living in this city?" One student answered, "Affordable housing." Another said, "Better transit." Mamdani listened. He asked follow up questions. He invited them to his next volunteer meeting. He let them design posters in blue, orange, white, borrow the campaign's megaphone for their own events. He never got disillusioned when no big donors signed up, when the traditional media ignored him, when the megaphone felt heavy and the footsteps long. He reminded himself, "If they won't give me a debate stage, I'll bring the debate to them street by street." His volunteer base grew. Students from the City University of New York, night shift delivery workers, immigrant taxi drivers, first time voters. They heard that voice with a megaphone. They felt a hand had extended. By the time the primaries rolled around, those early sidewalk stops mattered. They became stories that spread. What began as a campaign with almost no chance became a movement that couldn't be ignored. Conservative commentators and Trump aligned media branded him a socialist Muslim radical. Social media swarmed with Islamophobic slurs and mockery. Then came Donald Trump himself, now back in the White House, who decided to make Mamdani his latest target. If communist candidate Zohran Mamdani wins, it is highly unlikely that I will be contributing federal funds other than the very minimum as required to my beloved first home. He called Mamdani a pure communist, warned that New York under him had zero chance of success or even survival, and threatened to cancel nearly $18 billion in federal grants earmarked for housing and infrastructure. Trump even added mockingly, he needs the money from me, so what's the point of voting for him? But Mamdani did not blink. He stood his ground and fired back at the same night. Hear me, President Trump. When I say this, to get any of us, you'll have to get through all of us. He will soon take office under a Republican president who has openly threatened to choke his city's funding, a governor in waiting with a federal noose around New York City's budget. They called him a Muslim, like it was an accusation. He wore it like armor. They called him radical. He called it empathy. To see where his moral steel was forged, we travel back to 2021. New York's taxi medallion collapse had left thousands of immigrant cabbies crushed under impossible debt. Many had lost home, some had lost hope, while others offered sympathy. Mamdani offered solidarity, sitting on the cold pavement beside them. For 15 days, he joined drivers in a hunger strike outside the city hall. By day 5, police zip tied and arrested him for blocking traffic. By day 13, a diabetic driver collapsed in a wheelchair, whispering, this is our last fight for dignity. On day 15, the city finally yielded, agreeing to cap medallion debt and slash the payments. That victory wasn't just economic, it was emotional, a line crossed from protest to possibility. He often spoke to them in three tongues, English, Hindi, and Urdu, and they replied in one, trust. The hunger strike that fed no stomach ended up feeding a movement. At the start, pollsters gave him 1%, a statistical error, a footnote. But door by door, borough by borough, that number rose. He spoke of housing as a human right, transit as dignity, and immigrants as the city's heartbeat. His authenticity became his algorithm. When money ignored him, volunteers appeared. When elites scoffed, the working class stood taller. When media doubted, word of mouth became his son. In those days, he was still living in a one bedroom apartment in Astoria, barely able to cover campaign bills. As one report put it, Zohran Mamdani could go from a one bedroom home to the mayor's mansion. That contrast between his modest life and his massive mandate became the symbol of his authenticity. He hadn't climbed to power through privilege, he had walked there. On an election night, the impossible happened. The 1% became the majority. He didn't win despite being an outsider, he won because he was one. To grasp the roots of his resilience, you must meet his family. Zohran Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda in 1991, a land once scarred by Idi Amin's expulsion of Asian Indians. His father, Mahmood Mamdani, a Ugandan scholar of Gujarati Indian Muslim descent, returned after exile to rebuild. His works on colonialism and citizenship became academic cornerstones. His mother, Mira Nair, the Punjabi Indian filmmaker behind Salam Bombay and Monsoon Wedding, told stories of survival and solidarity. Together, they raised Zoran in a home where the film reels met philosophy, where art served activism. As a child, he lived between Uganda, South Africa, and New York continents, stitched together by conversation. He studied at the Bronx High School of Science, then at Bowdoin College, majoring in Africana Studies. For him, activism wasn't a career choice, it was inheritance. From Kampala's red soil to Queen's neon glow, Zohran Mamdani's rise is a journey stitched from exile to hope. He reminds us that democracy is not kept by wealth or lineage, but by those who still believe change can walk on foot. On that November night, quoting Nehru and closing with Dhoom Machale, he merged two Indias, the solemn and the celebratory. The India that fought for freedom and the India that dances when it finally tastes it. From 1% to victory, from hunger strikes to headline, from the son of cinema and scholarship to the voice of a city. This is the Zohran Mamdani you do not know. Thank you for watching. I am Ajay Prakash.